Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. Truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. Really helps me out and I really appreciate it. Okay, so before we get started, major trigger warning here. Heavy talk about Assa and unaliving. So if you're sensitive to those topics, please click off now and come back at a later time. It also really heavily involves cyberbullying, bullying in general. It pretty much, that's the basis of it. So, number one, if that is triggering to you, if you've been through that, this might not be right for you, the right video for you. And if you are the bully or the cyber bully, I think that you should probably reevaluate your life and stop being a sucky person and get off of here. Okay. But if you feel comfortable enough to stay and hang out with me, let's just jump right in. An invisible illness is defined as one that does not exhibit externally visible signs or symptoms. Those suffering from invisible illnesses may experience symptoms of pain, fatigue, dizziness, weakness, or mental health disorders. These illnesses show no obvious signs to an outside observer. Because symptoms cannot be seen from outside observers, people tend to be less empathetic, sympathetic, and understanding to these very real and very debilitating illnesses. Catherine Daisy Coleman, who was better known as Daisy or Cat, was born on March 30th, 1993 in Albany, Missouri, to parents Melinda and Michael Coleman. She was one of 4 children with 2 older brothers named Charlie and Logan and a younger brother named Tristan. She graduated from Albany High School in 1995 before going on to attend college at Missouri Valley after receiving a wrestling scholarship. Couple of years into her college career, she went on to pursue her passion for tattoos and would eventually go on to become an amazing tattoo artist. When Daisy was just 9 years old, she and her brother were in a terrible car accident. The 2 siblings would have to climb out of the back window to safety. Her father, the driver, would tragically pass away in this crash. After the 2006 death of their father and Melinda's beloved husband, she decided it was time for a fresh start. So in 2009, she decided to move her family to Maryville, Missouri, so that her and her children could have a fresh start. Maryville is a college town that's about 85 miles north of Kansas City. Also about an hour away from Albany, Missouri, where they had originally grown up. Growing up, Daisy was your all-American girl. She had blonde hair, she was a cheerleader, she was on the dance team, and she did beauty pageants. One night in January of 2012, 14-year-old Daisy and her best friend, 13-year-old Paige, were in her room watching horror movies and sipping alcohol. The girls met when they were about 9 or 10 years old, and they were both outcasts, so they gravitated towards each other quite easily. Daisy was texting a popular senior, 17-year-old Matthew Barnett, whom she had met through her older brother, Charlie. He offered to pick the girls up at their house so that they could hang out. At 1 a.m., the girls decided to sneak out of the house and get into Matthew Barnett's car with him and 3 other boys. The girls were incredibly intoxicated at this point when they had left Daisy's home. So when they were getting into the car, they were intoxicated to begin with. On the way back to Matt's house, they stopped at a restaurant that Nick Grumatti's family owned to pick up a bottle of vodka. Daisy says that the girls got to his house, they snuck through a couple backyards, and then they went in through a basement window. At the house was Matthew Barnett, Jordan Zeck, Nick Grumattis, and Cole Forney. There was also a unnamed juvenile at the house. The underage juvenile would end up pulling 13-year-old Paige into Matt's sister's bedroom and later admit to essaying her. Barnett hands Daisy a tall glass of clear liquid that he referred to as the bitch cup. In other words, if you don't drink it, you're a wimp. So Daisy says that she drinks the cup and she takes a couple shots out of a bottle, and that's basically the last thing that she remembers. Next thing she knows, she's being dropped off at 2 a.m. and she wasn't found until 4:50 in the morning. Daisy's mother and her youngest brother, Tristan, hear something in the front yard. Her mother says that she originally thought it was the dogs, but when her and Tristan went outside to investigate, they realized that it's Daisy. January nights in Missouri can reach temperatures as low as 26 degrees Fahrenheit and rarely reach temperatures higher than 41 degrees. That night, it was a very cold 22 degrees. Daisy was laying there in just a t-shirt and sweats, no socks, no shoes. Her hair was wet and her hair and her hands were frozen to the ground. Her little brother thought that she was dead because she was blue and sparkly. They immediately scoop Daisy up, bring her inside, and put her in a hot bath. Her brother Charlie says he picked up her phone, and the first thing he saw was a message from Maddie B. And he says it's at that point that he knew exactly what had taken place. While they had Daisy in the tub, they spotted bruising around her thighs and her groin area. Her mother asked her if she was hurting, and Daisy says yes, and she begins to cry. So her mother immediately took her to the hospital, where doctors would not only confirm that Daisy had been R-worded, Paige had also been R-worded the evening before, but that this was also how she would end up losing her virginity. Daisy's blood alcohol level at between 9 and 10 a.m. was 0.14. So imagine what it was hours prior. Unfortunately, she had been outside far long to detect if any date rape drugs were slipped to her. On top of this, Daisy knew these boys because they played football with her oldest brother, Charlie. They had been to her house many times, and she trusted them.
And my sister was assaulted by a group of guys that I thought were my friends and left to die in my yard in sub-freezing weather. They were my teammates. I ate with them at lunch. I had classes with them 3 or 4 hours a day. They were close enough to me. They know they could have called me and I would have came and got her at 2 in the morning or whatever time. But instead, the guys, they sat there, they kind of egged it on, they took picture and video, and they let it happen.
Mother Melinda would say, quote, "These boys would come over and watch football in my living room. I'd make chili for them. They used to come over to our house all the time. Charlie regarded Nick as his best friend, and yet they did this and left Daisy in the dirt." End quote. And although she doesn't remember a lot of details from that night, Daisy would say that she'd begin throwing up everywhere. The boys snuck her out through the basement window and drove her back to Daisy's home. Once they got there, they told Paige to just go in and go to Daisy's room, telling her that Daisy just needed some fresh air, and they assured her that she would be perfectly fine and that they would sit with her until she sobered up. So Paige, being a 13-year-old girl, believes them, goes inside, goes into Daisy's room, and says she blacks out. After Paige walks inside, the boys basically dump Daisy in the dirt, throw her belongings around, and leave her on the front lawn until she's found by her mother and her brother, which is 3 hours later. And that's the other thing. This whole thing happened within an hour. So the girls were picked up about 1, and they were back home by 2. After the hospital, Daisy and her mother went to speak with police and file charges. Daisy told officers what she remembered, and just hours after filing charges, police would arrest 2 teen boys. Matthew Barnett, who would admit to police that he did have sex with Daisy that night, but went on to say that it was consensual. And Jordan Zek, who actually admitted to using Nick Grumatis's cell phone to videotape the encounter. So basically, Jordan Zek takes Nick Grumatis's phone and videotapes this R word happening. He goes back into the room, where all the boys are hanging out, and they watch it. He tells police that, yes, he did it. Yes, he watched it. Yes, the boys watched it, and then they deleted the video. And he says that neither one of them were wearing pants. But he says that he thought that they were just dry humping. Others say that the video was passed around school, and actually, one of Daisy's brother's friends told him that saw the video and that it's a terrible video, that it's very dark, and you don't want to see it. Matthew Burnett admitted to police that he had sex with Daisy that night, but went on to say that it was consensual, even though the boys admitted to police that Daisy was unconscious and that she had to be carried out of the house. A few weeks later, prosecutor Robert Rice would drop the charges, citing insufficient evidence. It's also important to note that Matthew Burnett's grandfather is a former Republican state representative. Just days after the news of Daisy's allegations became public, she and her family received major backlash from the small Maryville community of 12,000 people. Classmates of Daisy's took to social media to say that she had been, quote, asking for it at the party. They would send her messages saying that this is how she should slit her wrists so that she could unalive herself. One day, Daisy gets up to go to the bathroom in school, and a boy in another class jumps out into the hallway and calls her a lying slut. Daisy's so upset by this that she runs to the bathroom, calls her mother, and begs her mother to come pick her up. Her mother comes and picks her up, and Daisy would actually do this multiple times for the same reason. She would go home and she would lock herself in her room. But because of social media, there's never really ever a way to truly escape your... Now, is there? She would post something as simple as, "I'm tired," and people would think she was talking about the case and they would begin lashing out at her. They started the hashtags, "I hate Daisy," and the hashtag, "Jordan and Matt are free." College girls and even some adults that were related to the boys that were at the home that evening would start calling Daisy a bitch, a whore, and a slut every single day of her life. After the charges on the teens were dropped, things got even worse. Girls in Daisy's class were wearing t-shirts that read Matt 1, Daisy 0. Daisy actually burned the name of her perpetrator into her skin. One of her brothers was booed at his final wrestling match. Then a friend of Daisy's mother would inform her that a bunch of students were planning on beating up her son in the high school parking lot because of his sister's allegations. Daisy's mother, Melinda, who was a veterinarian and a very talented bodybuilder, would end up losing her job at the veterinary clinic that she worked for. A coworker of Melinda's would say, quote, "This is a small community and it definitely was stressful for us here without a doubt," end quote. She would go on to say, quote, "But if you were to ask me point blank why Mrs. Coleman was fired, I would say it's because our style of medicine didn't jive," end quote. That basically means I pretty much fired her because of the backlash, but I can't say that for legal reasons, so this is what I would say. Daisy would later say in an interview that even though she had never been the sensitive type, after you hear these things about yourself so much, you start to believe that they're true. It made her begin to question if she really was these things and if this was just all her fault. 1 year after the incident, a team called Anonymous Justice got word of Daisy and Paige's story and began to fight hard for Daisy's case to be reopened. Paige would end up getting justice for what happened to her in juvenile court. Paige will say that she has patchy memories of the incident happening because she also was very, very intoxicated. And this was like the first night the girls had ever really experimented with drinking as well. So they actually say in one of their interviews that they knew that they were drunk, but they didn't even realize, like, they've never been drunk before, that they didn't even know how bad they were because they had nothing, I guess, to compare it to. He says that as soon as they got there, the girls got separated. She got taken into the room. She says that the boy took off her clothes. He put on a condom. She says that she did tell him no, but that she didn't fight really hard for it. And then, she does say, I wonder if I fought harder, if that would have changed anything. But on the other hand, what if that would have changed something? Like, what if that would have made it worse? Luckily for her, he admitted to everything in juvenile court. Daisy, on the other hand, was not so fortunate. Paige would come forward to say that when her and Daisy went in for a deposition, they were read their Miranda rights, placed in separate rooms at one point, and the detectives would begin to try and pin the girls against each other. So basically, they would say things like, she's blaming everything on you. You better tell on her before she tells on you. Remember, these girls are 14 and 15 now at this time, right? And, to be fair, in the police's defense, this is a method of interrogation that we see all the time. I can't tell you how many times I have seen it, and it works brilliantly sometimes. Against the perpetrators, against the suspects, not against the victims. A victim's advocate that was hired by Melinda would post a petition online in an attempt to get Daisy the justice she so desperately deserved. The prosecutor on the case, Robert Rice, reached out to her to tell her that he was furious about this petition, and because of it, he was going to ruin the girls and punish the moms for allowing this petition to be circulated around the internet.
Case in Nottoway County in 2012. Part of that interview, the witnesses declared their willingness to cooperate and testify in court on that case. Until that time, the witnesses never told me that they were willing to cooperate and testify after they invoked their Fifth Amendment right in a deposition under oath. In recent days, the Kansas City Star published an article that called into question the integrity of the criminal justice process in this case. Their cooperation was not there. And at the end of the day, I figured that this was going to become an issue. And so one of the last things we did in this case was to do a deposition under oath that was recorded by a court reporter with people present, attorney, so that we could record under oath that they were in fact invoking their Fifth Amendment right to not testify, knowing that by failing to testify, it would force me to have to dismiss the case against the accused.
Sir, just to clarify, when you say they took the Fifth Amendment, you didn't feel the case was strong enough to still try even without their cooperation?
No, so it requires that the person prove sexual intercourse without consent. I need to prove all the elements of the crime.
So you don't feel you could have tried it without their cooperation, though?
Correct.
Because with their confessions in the police records, these boys, to these actions, you didn't think you had the evidence?
Correct, because there it was an issue that they were saying it was consent.
Things got so bad that Melinda began to fear for the safety of her children and herself. So it was at that point that she decided to pack up and move her family back to their original home that they still owned in Albany. 8 months after the family moved out of Maryville, the Coleman home that Melinda was trying to sell at the time would mysteriously go up in flames, which would be the Maryville home. Fire investigators would rule the cause of the fire to be electrical. Melinda would say that she believes that the blaze was caused by arson from Maryville residents. The home was only 3 years old. It was a spec home and it was a new addition. Even though they didn't find electrical at the site of origin, they didn't find an accelerant either. She would go on to say that on one hand, it was comforting to think that the fire was an electrical issue, but on the other hand, there's a big part of her and me that truly thinks the residents were responsible for this. I'm just saying. This is my opinion. The state would end up being forced to charge Matthew Barnett with something because of the immense backlash being received worldwide at this point.
I mean, at first blush, there's no denying that from the surface it appears to be some sort of cover-up. But when you look at the finer details, there are telltale signs of this girl actually lying. She is leaving her home at 1 a.m. in the morning, and nobody forced her to drink. And what happens? She gets caught by her mom. She's embarrassed. And the easy way out here is, Mom, someone took advantage of me. But what did she expect to happen at 1 a.m. in the morning after sneaking out? I'm not saying, assuming that these facts are accurate and this did happen, I'm not saying that she deserved to be. But knowing the facts as we do here, including what the prosecutor has set forth, this case is going nowhere, and it's going nowhere quick.
So he would not be charged for the SA. Rather, he was charged with child endangerment and sentenced to 4 months in prison that would be suspended after a 2-year probation, i.e., no jail time. He was forced to pay restitution to Daisy and forced to do a handwritten apology. Daisy would say that she never received the money or the apology. Daisy would start to have anxiety issues, panic attacks, and she would start shaking uncontrollably and begin to have breathing problems. She would begin cutting, and she would attempt to unalive herself at least 3 times with prescription medicines. Things got so bad that her mother and brothers would sleep around Daisy's bed in sleeping bags so that they could watch her at night. Her mother would also say in another interview that all the doors in the upstairs were broken because they would have to break the door down to get to Daisy to save her. Eventually, her brothers would convince her to start wrestling again, and this was really hard for her at first because she would have to be close to boys, which makes perfect sense, right? But her coach was very supportive, and because her brothers were on the team, it became like a safe place for her. Then one day after a meet, she came home and she says she's sitting in her room and she began to think, I really don't deserve this abuse. I'm only human. I didn't do anything wrong. And she's right. She didn't do anything wrong. She decided that she wanted to go back to being the girl who actually enjoyed her life. So she began speaking out. She began telling her story over and over and over again. Then in October, a local newspaper would run an article about Daisy's story, and seemingly overnight, girls began to come forward to her and began talking to her. They would tell her about how they were worded, but they were too scared to come forward because when they would go home at the end of the day, they would feel as if nobody would believe them or even care that this has happened to them. Daisy would tell the girls that there will always be skeptics out there, but it will only take one person to believe you to make you feel heard. Daisy, with the help of her brother, would then decide to make an online platform that they would call Safe B.A.E. The platform would educate others about consent, acquaintance, and online bullying. During this time, tattoos also became a huge part of Daisy's life. Not only was she an incredibly talented artist, but getting tattoos from others forced her. When I heard her say this, I was like, wow. It was just, I don't know why. It was so powerful to me. Getting tattoos from others forced her to trust another person with her body and also forced her to allow herself to give consent to another person to do something with her body. At the age of 16, Daisy began to partake in extensive therapy to help her move past her trauma, and for a small period of time, it did work. She would still constantly speak about the bullying that she faced across social media. Then eventually she would decide to move to Colorado for a fresh start. Her mother and her younger brother would actually help her move down there and get her settled in. On the way back home, Daisy's youngest brother, Tristan, and Melinda would end up getting into a horrible car crash where Tristan would pass away, seemingly mirroring the same way that Melinda lost her husband and the kids lost their dad so many years ago.
I thought maybe if I moved out of Missouri that things would turn around for me. So I moved here to Colorado, and my little brother and my mom helped me move out here. And on the way back from moving out here, my little brother and my mom got into a tragic car accident, and my little brother passed away as a result of that.
After having to bury her brother, Daisy began to focus more on her advocacy and her safe B.A.E, which the B.A.E is before anyone else webpage. However, Daisy would constantly receive harassment from an alleged stalker, and her mother would say that she never truly moved past all the trauma that she faced that January night in 2012. April 14th, 2020. Daisy would write on her Facebook page, "In 2 months, it will be 2 years since Tristan's energy returned to the universe and since his physical body left us. I'm really glad to be home with my family for this quarantine so I can help around the house, but it makes me really sad going downstairs and not seeing him on the couch with a blunt in hand or going on little adventures with him. He really was my best friend and the one I shared all of my secrets with. I've been reflecting on a lot of my favorite memories lately. It makes it seem like he isn't quite so far away. So if any of you have a memory of Tristan, would you mind sharing them in the comments with me? I want to hear about the times he made you guys laugh, how he had helped you, how he made a difference, or even how he changed your views." Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. At approximately 4 p.m., police would receive a phone call from Melinda Coleman begging them to do a welfare check on Daisy. Daisy would speak with officers for over an hour and never gave them any indication that she wanted to or planned to harm herself. For these reasons, Daisy was medically cleared and there were no legal reasons to hold her on the grounds of mental health. Tragically, just a few hours later at 8:30 p.m., a friend of Daisy would call police saying that she had herself in her apartment. Police and later on Melinda would both confirm that these allegations were indeed the truth. After Daisy's death, her mother Melinda flooded her Facebook page with all the grief she was feeling, writing posts that included, "Albany wins, I'm dead. God may have given me every single thing I wished for and dreamed of, my soulmate and my 4 beautiful children. It just never seemed long enough. I wanted it forever." 4 months after Daisy's unaliving, on Sunday, December 6th, 2020, her 58-year-old mother, Melinda, who was a gifted veterinarian, a devoted wife, and single mother, would follow in her daughter's footsteps and take her life in the same exact way that Daisy did inside of her home. Her 25-year-old son, Logan, was home at the time and was the person that would find her. Oh my God.
Melinda's bottomless grief of losing her husband, her son Tristan, and Daisy, who also died in August at the age of 23, was, quote, more than she could face most days. In their announcement of Melinda's death, the organization remembers her as a gifted veterinarian, devoted mother and wife, and talented bodybuilder who loved and believed in her children. The post concludes by saying, quote, "It is no accident that she created some of the most gifted, passionate, and resilient children."
I can't even imagine this. Hours before her unaliving, Melinda took to Facebook to leave a bunch of heart-wrenching posts. "There aren't enough I love yous that I could have said when I was holding your cold, broken, dead body. I held you like a baby anyway, my baby, the baby that I held when you first came into this world. It has always been my greatest honor and joy to be your mother and best friend, Mama Bear. Baby girl. All the I love yous I never said. Beautiful girl, you can do amazing things. Then to her son Tristan. There's no way out. I hold my breath. I look at the sky. The stars spell death. You gave me hope, my strength to fight. My soul's restored when I see light. 4 months ago today, my baby girl left this world with a broken heart and spirit, out of hope and full of despair. She took all her pain and worked to help others. Many used her and still are stealing her pictures and quotes simply for their own gain. The narcissists and users that have nothing to say, so they steal her. The line became very blurred on some friends. Others truly loved her, more than she could see in that terrible moment. All she could see was the continued harassment and cruelty and the damage sustained to her poor little body. I'd like to challenge everyone to be kind and lift up others in pain, especially SA survivors and those hopeless in this holiday season. Send out light and love and protect each other, and I will protect and pray for anyone who needs it. Let's make this a Daisy Day filled with light, hope, and love. Let's work toward a justice system that stops failing the victims of our word. Let's fill today with Daisy's light and love. And before we wrap this up, let's talk about Mr. Matthew Barnett right quick and see what this little gem has been up to these days. Shout out to the Daily Mail for catching up with him in December of 2020. When they found him, he was 26 years old, living more than 100 miles from Maryville, Missouri, on a quiet street in Kansas City, Missouri, with an unnamed female. Property records show that the couple purchased their two-bedroom home in 2017. He works a $55,000 a year job as a project manager for an industrial roofing firm called Delta Innovative Services. He's been working for the company since at least 2018 and was part of the company when they installed, ready, a new roof onto an elementary school in Smithville, which is a few miles north of Kansas City. How lovely. And although he didn't physically install the new roof, he visited the elementary school a number of times to carry out inspections and had conversations with the school board. It's more than I would want to be allowed. It is said that he often returns home to Maryville to visit his family in the home where the alleged incident took place, and even makes appearances on his realtor mother Shirley's social media page. Shirley would actually tell the Daily Mail in 2013 that he deserves an apology, and that the accusations have ruined his life. While his father Tommy told them that his son has been subjected to assassination. Boo fucking who. All right, guys, if you're still here, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet and you feel so inclined to. But, and however, most importantly, don't be a fucking bully. Don't just be a decent person, okay? Just be a decent person. Just, you know what? How about this? How about everybody just tries, okay? If you have something nasty to say, just shut your computer, turn off your phone, shut your iPad off, and just go about your fucking business. Why do you have to leave shitty fucking messages to people? I just don't understand it. I never did. I never will. It's not my thing. It's not my thing. It's not my thing. It's not my gig. I don't understand why leaving a nasty message to somebody makes you feel like how does that make you feel good? I don't get it. I never will get it. And I feel like the older you are and doing it, the more pathetic of a person that you are. That's just my opinion. That's my opinion all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. But other than that, I will see you guys next time and stay safe out there.